Welcome to Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
Hi, my name is Amanda Kate, and I am author of Divine Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence. And I'm a transformational coach and kinesiologist.
What is a kinesiologist?
I thought that might be where you started today. So kinesiology in Australia and other parts of the world is a little bit different to the northern United States and Canada. It is still about movement, but it's about the movement of energy. And so what we're looking at is the vibrational frequencies of what is stored in the body, the psychosomatic aspects, the emotional traumas, that sort of stuff that sits in our cellular body and creates dis-ease or lack of wellness or reactionary patterns that don't serve us. And so we're really looking at going and finding those things that are stopping us living our best life. And so it's looking at the person as a whole being, not just as, you know, you're behaving like that and that behavior is not very resourceful. Okay, well, why am I behaving like that? What created that behavior pattern and why is that not serving me and how is it not serving me? And so we look a lot into all of that kind of stuff because when you think about trauma, a lot of people think car accidents or abuse or the big things, but trauma is anything less than nourishing and nurturing that we store in our body. And so that could be anything. It could be constantly, like I used to as a kid, stubbing your toe, or it could be your parents shouting at you or being overly critical. It could be a lot of those little things that actually can be stored in the body because it depends on how we react to them.
Right.
So our unresourceful behaviors as adults are often just these behaviors that have been trained into us to effectively keep us safe, so to speak. And when we think about the way that we're physiologically built, the idea is we're accepted by our tribe and we get to live to adulthood, or we're cast out into the wilderness to die. So that ancient programming is still in our head. So our unresourceful behaviors often are our way of thinking that we're going to be accepted more readily by the people that we live with and our community.
Is that like their book, The Body Keeps the Score? Is that what the idea is?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. So The Body Keeps the Score. David Hawkins does a lot of work on it. Bruce Lipton is another big proponent of it. Even to a certain extent, people like Joe Dispenza and Louise Hay, it's kind of a combination of a lot of that sort of information where we're looking at that mind-body-spirit connection and how those physical ailments and physical diseases are often caused by emotional stresses.
I have been thinking about this a lot, that I feel satisfied with my life, even like I'm living a big life, you know, meaningful. And I've accepted me in this body. If this is the last body I'm going to have, this is it, then I'm okay with it. But I notice I overeat and I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I don't feel like I have an issue that I can call upon. So is that some of the help you do? Not necessarily emotional eating, but how do you dig deep and find it if the person doesn't know what it is?
And so this is what I absolutely love about it. So we use muscle testing. So we're testing the tone of the electrical impulse that's going through the muscle. So when you're pressing on a muscle that's unstressed, it will hold steady. But if I think of something quite stressful, that tone will give and it will not stay in position. A really good way to practice it yourself is if you put both feet on the floor and stand centered and you think of something that you absolutely love, your body will move forward because you've got an attraction to that thing. If we put something in front of you that you do not like, or if you think of something that you really, truly do not like, your body will move backwards and it's a natural aversion. The same kind of thing is what I am doing with muscle testing. And what it can read is the subconscious programming that's going on, because our conscious mind is a tiny part of where we're at. And most people think that the subconscious is this thing between our ears. They think that the subconscious is stored in there. But our subconscious is in every single cell of our body and every little atom, energetic vibration that is us. So it's our auric field, it's our chakra system, it's our entire body, every system, organ, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, therefore, can store memory. It can store behaviors. It can store reactions. It can store emotions. And that's what we're getting into in reading. We're looking at where if you think about it like a river system, we're looking at where those dams have been built that are stopping the flow of that river.
Mm-hmm.
Or where that flow, the dam in the river, is creating a flood somewhere else because the water's not allowed to pass through. Or I describe it to people like the electrical system of their house. And people usually recognize themselves in one way or the other. If you think about when you were at your most stressed, some people want to fight their way through the stress and outrun the stress. So they will bake and they will cook and they will clean and they will action their way through the stress. That is like having every light and every electrical appliance all through your house, all switched on and going at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, when they're stressed, are the people who sit on the couch and flick through Netflix or stare at a screen or do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Often these two people are in relationship with each other.
That's funny.
If ever you've been with a partner and you're like, you are so lazy, you sit there and you're staring at the screen, often that is their way of dealing with stress. And other people will get into that busy mode. Now, I'm one of those people who sort of swing between them. But in the past, I was very, very much that I will fight my way through this and I will keep going and I will make sure that I outrun the stress because I didn't even recognize it as stress.
So is it possible that I'm just not recognizing the stress, but there has to be some? Because I just don't understand what's wrong with me because I don't feel like anything's wrong with me.
There's two different ways of looking at that. One is that you've done enough work and that you go, I'm actually really happy. And that sometimes we do feel like there's something wrong with us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at that place now where the only reason I'm continuing to do this work is because I'm a spiritual seeker and I want to learn more about what's going on in my body and more about what's going on in the universe. And I realize that the more I know, the less I know.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
But I'm also not in delusion that I've, say, had an easy life or whatever.
Yeah.
I can fully recognize it. A lot of people get into more of a delusionary capacity where they will pretend everything's okay and they act as though everything's okay. But there will always be those signs, if you're in delusion, that you're in delusion. And often other people can see them.
What are the signs? Because I need to know what they are.
But you know what? You're doing a job that you love.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I can see that every time I interact with you on socials and see you on my feed and on LinkedIn, I can see how much you love what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're bringing that to the world. Now, that's not a delusionary capacity.
And I'm in the happiest, most loving, magical relationship. I mean, there's nothing for me to be upset about. So that's what I'm confused about.
That's perfect. No,
I know. I'm very happy, but also I overeat. So it must be what they call emotional eating, but I don't know what the emotion is.
Do you know, there can be lots of different things. So if you think about eating as a very general thing, our stomach is where we process our hunger or our greed. So greed for more, or we're hungering for something. Mm-hmm. It can also be where we absorb our nurturing and nourishment. And so sometimes with the overeating, if you think about how we were rewarded when we were younger with food, do you know what? You were kicking it, darling. You were doing amazing work. Oh, I'm going to reward myself.
Yeah, I can see that.
It could simply be a reward system whereby you end up eating as a reward because that's how you got rewarded in the past. And I often find myself, say, buying a little treat for the kids or doing, and I'm going, oh my God, am I setting this up? And I may well be, who knows? We'll find out later how much I've traumatized them.
Well, you have. It just depends on what they decide what it was that you did.
Exactly. And I think that's part of it as well, is we don't always understand where all of our behaviors come from.
Yeah.
For me, I want to know, and that's why I search. And also I had a lot of trauma to clear. So, I kind of came from it from a different perspective, but I look at my life now and I, again, same as you've said, I am in this incredible relationship that I absolutely adore. I'm doing a job that I love. I've bought a home with my partner that is just perfect for us. I get to walk the beach most mornings. I get to walk almost 2 hours on the beach, rain, hail or shine with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
In the most beautiful place. And even when it is peeing down with rain and I'm soaked, there is still nowhere I'd rather be.
Right.
And so I think when we are in that really good place, we get to appreciate the wonder, the awe and the magic of being there. Part of that for me comes from living to our internal truth rather than the external influences. So you're not living a life, I am guessing, from what you've described, of doing the things that tick the boxes that society's told you ought to tick for a successful life.
Assume no.
Because you're doing something that sets your heart on fire.
Right.
Now, for me, part of the reason I knew that I wasn't happy was because I'd done all the tick boxes. I abided by my parents' rules. I lived to what they expected. I didn't, go outside the lines. I stayed in the good girl mold. I looked at pleasing everybody else. I got good grades at high school, university, worked for my dad for a bit, went traveling, met a man, 2 kids, married, beautiful home, international travel. Yet I was miserable and I was getting sick because none of that was me following my prescription for my life. It was me looking outside of myself and what am I expected to do to live the life that I'm told I need to live.
Right.
And that's where we get that soul discordance because my soul was screaming at me that this was not my path to walk.
Yeah.
And that I needed to walk a different path. And that's often how we know we're on a different path is because we're getting this crazy feelings in our body. Now, if we've always followed our intuition and acted on it and done all of those right things, I don't think we ever would have the problems that we kind of create for ourselves now.
Right. Well, it takes a really long time to learn to trust ourselves. And I know that.
Hell yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I always had the intuition. My intuition told me exactly what was going on. My big problem was because I was always told that I was too sensitive and I was overreactive and I needed thicker skin and there was always something wrong with me. When I got my intuition in, I did not trust it.
Right.
And therefore I was too afraid to act on it because it wasn't what other people said I could do or I should do or whatever. And I listened more to that because that was the way I'd been conditioned. Everybody else knows better for me than I do.
Right.
Which when you think about it, it's crazy.
It is crazy. But I was that child. I was the youngest of 6 kids. And the one just older than me, they would ask her what I like to eat. And so would I, because I didn't even know. I didn't trust me to know.
Yeah.
It took me half my life to trust myself. But recently.
I couldn't even finish a sentence till I went to school because my sister spoke for me.
Yes, that's it. It's so crazy.
And that, I guess, is where your turnaround would have come because you started going, well, hang on a minute. Do I really want other people to speak for me? Do I really want to have to ring my sister when I'm at a restaurant? What should I order?
It seems so crazy now that it was ever a thing.
It does. And yet also it's really understandable in so many ways because, well, she's been around longer. She might know me better.
She did. And she was never somebody who was unsure of herself. She had an answer. And I always assumed I didn't know anything because that was our roles. It took a really long time to decide that, even though that's what I believed for most of my life, that wasn't true anymore. And it was okay to step out of that role, which is so funny that even though I was no longer at home and under her, I was still living as if.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And that bit there that you're talking about is the trauma. That bit there is that trauma patterning. And what you have done is made a really conscious decision to change that pattern. This doesn't feel like my story that I'm living. So how do I make it my story? How do I create it to be my story? How do I make sure that going forward from now, I'm not ringing my sister at a restaurant to say, what do I want to eat for dinner? Or I'm not deferring to other people's opinions or my perception of what they want me to do. I'm living to what I want to do. I'm looking at what resonates to my heart and soul, what feels right in my body to make the decisions for my life.
So say I've made that decision mentally, but if my body's keeping the score, how do you help somebody with that? Yes, intellectually, I have decided I have a voice and I'm important and all those things. But what if my body is holding on? What if the trauma is still there? How do you help somebody there? Do you help with that?
Well, that's exactly what kinesiology and other somatic therapies do. So somatic therapies are of the body. So what we're doing is we're looking at where those traumas are stored in the body and we're pulling them out like they're weeds and pull them out from the root. But because obviously we're not actually pulling things out of the body, what we're doing is we're using vibrational remedies to change that vibrational signature that is in those parts of the body. So whether we're using sound, which is the highest vibration healing that you can get is sound, we might use light, we might use color or essential oils or other vibrational remedies that then change that vibrational structure around that part of the body. So then the conscious mind and the subconscious mind are back in alignment with each other because we actually know we come into this world perfect, untouched, beautiful little souls that then live a very messy human experience. And all of us have these things that are stuck in our body,
right?
That we create belief systems around, that we create stories around. And even now I'll be in a session and a story will come up and I'll be like, how have I not seen that playing out? Oh my goodness. But because I wasn't meant to see it earlier.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. And
so then when I'm in the behavior or as I'm heading towards the behavior, I can go, whoa, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this really the path I want to take? Do I want to continue down that same well-worn path where I pretty well know the response I'm going to get and the result I'm going to get? Or do I want to back up and try something different?
Do you have to be local to you or can somebody get help in this way, like over Zoom or whatever?
The best way that I describe that, yes, they can get help over Zoom, is the same way that we're having a connection now. You are tuned into my radio station or frequency. You're reading my body language. You're listening to my words and we're connecting. Yeah. Likewise, I'm doing the same for you. So when I work with someone online, I tune into their own personal radio station. And then what I do is, if you could imagine like me grabbing my auric field and throwing it over you like a blanket so I can read what's going on. And then at the end of the session, I take that blanket off and we disconnect that connection to one another.
I like that.
Some people do it so that they take on that energy of the client. And I prefer to try and keep our energy fields as separate as possible. One, because it's easier for me when I finish a session, I can just close off. Whereas if I take on that energy, I then need to do a bit of clearing work on myself. So for me, it's probably laziness as much as anything. I don't want to do my clearing. And I also want to make sure that we're keeping your stuff, your stuff.
Yeah, I get that.
I like that idea.
Doing some emotional photo shoots, I am sometimes left with all those feelings.
Yeah.
I volunteer for an organization and I took a photo of a mother who lost her baby at 26 weeks. So it was a stillborn. And boy, did that stay with me. That was the first one I ever did like that. And luckily, this young woman, she was very early 20s, I'm sure. She found me on Facebook to thank me. And I was so happy that she did because I could see from her Facebook that she was going on with her life, but she had been stuck in that hospital room in my head, in that anguish. Yeah. And so I was so thankful to her for doing that because that helped me the next time, knowing that we all go through hard things and we do get through it. But I was holding on and didn't know how to do the clearing. I was just like in the middle of her anguish.
When you are on that really higher end of the empathy, because you're not just understanding their emotion, you can be feeling their emotion. You can be in their emotion. You can be reading their body language and mirroring that back. It's almost like you're, to some extent, experiencing a form of what they're experiencing. Oftentimes, I will have to ask myself, hang on a minute, is this mine? When it's a, no, this isn't, this isn't yours. What I do then is I say to the universe, can you please take this from me and hand it back to whomever it belongs to? And if they're meant to find the tools in this lifetime to help them deal with it, then let them.
Yeah, that's really great. I love that.
Say, for example, it was this lady in the hospital and I knew I was carrying her stuff. I don't want to hand it back directly to that person because then to me, that's creating another connection.
Yeah.
If it were up to me, everyone would be doing the work. Everyone would be looking at their internal traumas. But it's not everybody's path to walk. So I go, if they're meant to find the tools, then let them find the tools. And then I am left with the bit that is mine and I can work out what to do with that.
Do you know who Byron Katie is?
Yes.
That just made me think of something she said. Like when you say, I'm trying to help everybody. She's like, take a look at yourself. Don't try to help the world. The world will come to it when they need to. And you just worry about you. I love that. Once you have some peace, you want everybody to also have peace and however they can get it, but it's not yours to bestow. Tell me about your book and what it's about and how it came about.
Divine Messy Human is a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence. And again, it's because I lived most of my life looking at those external tick boxes and finding myself miserable and sick, going, is this really what life is supposed to be? It's a broad brush strokes, really, and also enough gritty stuff that you can get your teeth into to make some initial changes, to start opening up some of the questions. It's the book I needed when I started this journey in terms of introductory stuff to spirituality, to that inner work, to trauma work. And yet I still get deep and esoteric. So people who've been in the work for a while are like, oh, I like the way that was phrased, or that was really useful, or this will be a great reference for my client. It's bite-sized chunks that deal with lots of those different aspects in the one space. And it's done in quite a short format. So it's under 200 pages, very easily accessible. I even printed it in 12 font so that my main target market didn't have to worry too much about glasses and the like, because most of my clients, I do have young people in their teens and 20s, but most of my clients are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It was interesting because when it was ready, it just flowed. And it was 120 days from me typing my first word to actually holding the finished book in my hand, ready for sale. So it was ready, but it had been percolating in my head for probably 5 years before that under numerous different titles and guises and all of that. But I needed to have done enough healing work because although there's not a lot of my story in there, I wanted to make sure that the energy behind any part of my story was not said with any hint of nastiness or resentment or anything like that. I wanted it to be loving, kind, respectful, and done gracefully. And had I bought the book out sooner, I don't think that energy would have been there. Whereas I went through a massive transformation in 2020 and 2021 that really, really changed the way that I felt about everything that happened. I did a lot of healing in those years to that really deep level whereby I totally love in a deep way all of those people who have harmed me, and I do not condone their actions. And I want to tell it in a way that it can help other people to perhaps see some of the patterns that are in their life that are not helping them, again, without blame.
What do you think caused the transformation? What do you think made you ready to go through that then?
I was getting very sick and I felt like a broken, empty shell of a human being. And I couldn't have lived like that. And I didn't have the courage to do anything else. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay in my marriage. I wouldn't have stayed in my body had I had to. Something would have happened. I would have gotten even sicker and there would have been no other way out.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the path I was being led down, and I didn't want that for myself, for my children. I just didn't want that. And realistically, I knew that what was keeping me stuck was fear. I was afraid of how an already emotionally abusive person would take to being rejected and left, and what hell that might unleash. And it was not pleasant. And also, I am glad for every step I took. Mm-hmm. The big questions for me, and they are still things that I ask my clients and I check in for with myself. I looked at it and I went, is this the kind of relationship I would want for my children? If I knew that my children were dealing with what I was dealing with behind closed doors, would I be happy for them? And it was a resounding no.
Right.
Am I showing them the best version of love? Also a no. Am I being loved in a way that I want my children to be loved? Huge no. And when you start getting really real with those questions, yeah, it can be devastating. It can break your heart. And also, it was the biggest motivator for me to get out and for me to change, because I knew that there could be a different love. I knew there was a possibility of a different love. And even if there wasn't a possibility of a better love for me, I knew there was a possibility for happiness. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted to do was provide a non-toxic, happier home for my children. And now I take that question further, and it's not just about the relationship. I go, am I living the kind of life I want my children to live? If they came to me and said, this is what I'm doing with my life, would I be happy with them? If they were feeling the way I was feeling, if they were behaving the way I was, and I look at it now and I go, I can honestly say, yeah, I am. Back then I couldn't. And that's been the biggest catalyst for change.
How old were you and how old were your kids when you left your husband?
So I was 37. So I'm 44 now. And my children were, I think, 8 and 10. So they're coming up 17 and 15 now. Mm-hmm. They are amazing children. And I'm so grateful I did what I did, because they've both blossomed and grown in ways that I couldn't have foreseen. And I see the way that they respond in situations. And I don't talk about the work I do hugely at home. I don't necessarily talk about the personal development stuff I do. But in the way my behaviors have changed, in the way my communication has changed, I see them doing certain aspects of it almost via osmosis. And it's beautiful. It makes me so proud.
I was in my mid-30s. I think I was 34 when I left my husband, and my kids were just 2 and 6. 6-year-old said, Mom, you don't slam doors anymore. I didn't even know I was slamming doors, but we had made a pact that we weren't allowed to cuss each other out. So that's how I guess I did my cussing. So I really do think that I did a service showing them that that wasn't a loving marriage at all. So I wasn't doing them any favors by staying in it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So no. Even though they were with a single mom and it was hard, it was better. I really believe that.
As I can't remember who says it, but it's choose your heart.
Choose your heart, yeah.
I would take this hard every day over the heart I was in.
You know that moment right when you're falling asleep where you can feel yourself falling? It's so pleasant. You're about to drop and you know it, but you're half awake. It's a good thing I don't do drugs, because I can see how I would really like them, because that dropping is so pleasant.
Yes.
I shouldn't do drugs.
But the beauty is, if you play with meditation, you can be in that space for a lot longer as well. And that's one of the things that I've found is, even yesterday I had about a half hour. And so I just jumped up and did a meditation for a bit, and I hadn't slept well the night before. And all of a sudden I got into the rest of my day feeling energized and ready for the day. And I'd been in that beautiful floaty type feeling for a while. And it was just enough, turn off the brain for a little bit and move to almost like I'd had a nap.
Did you do a guided meditation?
I did yesterday, yeah. I actually did a yoga nidra. So that's the yogic sleep.
Okay.
Beautiful.
I like the guided, although I know I'm supposed to get past it. But I really enjoy somebody telling me what to do.
But supposed to, do you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Oh, okay.
I think tuning into yourself and you are taking that time out, I think that's what's important. I think there's too many shoulds and supposed tos and have tos that we really need to take that pressure off. And part of taking that pressure off, if you all of a sudden go, I really want to do a guided meditation and I'm going to do it and I'm not going to feel guilty for it, or I'm not going to feel like I should do it another way, you may end up meditating without a guided meditation sooner because there's no expectation that you have to. So it becomes a choice.
There's pressure to do it a certain way, and yet I'm the one in charge. If it's pleasant to do a guided meditation, why am I even judging myself that it should be something different? That is so interesting,
Exactly.
Really.
Because we think that one type of meditation is better than the other, or I don't know, transcendental meditation is better than this meditation, is better than that meditation. But realistically, even if we're just stopping and taking a few extra breaths and coming back to being present, it's all we need to do. It's about coming back to your body. And however we choose to do that, it's the same way that people go, oh, I can't meditate because my mind's too noisy. I'm like, welcome to being a human. Your
Exactly.
mind is noisy. And the idea of meditation is that we're just aware, oh, yeah, I've got monkey mind today.
Yeah.
Okay. And can I notice the thoughts rather than getting caught up in them? Or can I try and come back to the breath instead of paying attention to the thoughts? Can I just come back to my breath? It's taking the judgment off, and it's understanding that there are so many ways to do it. My meditation is often walking my dog on the beach. Now, people would go, well, that's not meditation, but I'm concentrating on the next step or the next little pick up of the ball and throw, or I'm looking out at the waves. I'm present. I'm there right then. And that to me is meditation.
I love that.
I know with one of Wayne Dyer's meditations, he breathes in, I am, and then breathes out, that I am. I am, that I am. And you concentrate on that the whole way through. And then you will notice you'll be off making your shopping list. And then you're like, oh, hang on a minute. I am, that I am. And that's the way of training it, so that you are more present, that you are feeling more connected to your own body.
Yeah.
And that you can then notice when your thoughts are running away with you in a normal everyday situation, you can go, oh, I'm off on that thought train. Do I want to be there, or do I want to be present and doing what I need to be doing? Okay, so how do I do that? I then take a couple of big deep breaths. I focus in on me. I come back.
I literally did that today. I went to a photo shoot. I had 3 headshots to do at this company that I've often done photo shoots with, luckily, because I forgot my backdrop. And the panic set in, like, well, what am I going to do? And I could feel my heart race. And then I took a step back and I took a bunch of deep breaths, and it's going to work out. I'll either be late or they'll have something I can use. But for a minute there, I was like, my heart is racing. But I came back to me really quick, because the truth is, no matter what, it's going to work out. I just don't know what it's going to look like. And I think that's true about everything in life.
Oh, 100%.
Even death is working out. Even death is okay, even though it's sad.
Well, do you know, we go through deaths all the time. We just don't call them deaths.
What does that mean?
When you look at the cycles of life, we go through little deaths all the time. So if you think about even just our menstrual cycle, when we bleed, it is going through the death cycle. We are killing off that womb wall that's coming away. Now, the womb space is our space of creation. It is our space of fertility. And when you think about a garden, it's the same. We plant our seeds, we nurture the plant, we allow it to grow. Then when it grows the fruit and bears fruit, and the fruit is at the right ripeness, we pick the fruit, we eat the fruit, and then it goes back to the earth when we get rid of it. Our projects at work are the same. You get contact with a client, you have a chat about their needs, you send them, a quote, they book you in, you do the job, you do your editing and whatever your post-production is, and you send them the thing that is then dead. You kill that off.
Right.
So we're doing little mini death cycles, even with your breath. The death of an in-breath is the birth of an out-breath. It's constantly happening.
I like that. I've heard that orgasms are mini deaths.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Absolutely.
I say hell yeah also.
Hell yes. And so we go through it all the time. And when we start to realize that cycle of life, that the seasons change and will continue to change, we realize how often we're faced with it. And that's why when, say, divorce happens, or when certain projects finish, or when we change jobs, we go through a grieving period. But we don't allow ourselves often to call it grief, because it's almost like, oh, well, that's not important enough for me to grieve. Well, you know what? Yeah, it is, because that was still a death. It was an ending that you need to honor. And so we go through these all the time. And I've found that the more that I recognize those cycles, the less I am afraid of the end for me. I'm like, oh, it's happening all the time. And what am I going to be reborn into? I don't know.
Right. I just read Steve Leder's The Beauty of What Remains. And it's about death. He's a rabbi who helps people at the end of life. And that book was so beautiful. And he calls death the perfect sleep. Because I do these volunteer photo shoots with people with terminal illnesses, it's really helping me to, I'm not scared of, but help me also just be more not scared of the cycle of life and the beauty of it, and that we go through hard things. We just do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. This was really, really pleasant. I just enjoyed everything you have to say. This was really a lovely conversation, and I do love how it flowed. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you. And thank you for your work in the world as well. Like I say, I'm loving watching your photos and everything come up. So it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thank you for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.